Louis Osbourne was born into a world already trembling with fame and chaos. His father was none other than Ozzy Osbourne, the Prince of Darkness, the man whose name became a symbol of heavy metal rebellion. For Louis, this wasn't just a cool title. It was a heavy crown he never asked to wear. From the moment he opened his eyes, the world around him was loud. Music, lights, cameras, and madness. Louis was Ozzy's first son from his first marriage to Thelma Riley. While Ozzy was becoming a global icon, touring with Black Sabbath, and later as a solo artist, Louis grew up watching his father's life explode with both success and destruction. Fame brought luxury, but it also brought chaos. There were parties, scandals, and headlines that never stopped. And for a young boy, it was all too much. Ozzy wasn't around much in those early years. His wild lifestyle kept him on the road, and Thelma had to raise Louis mostly on her own. Louis loved his father, but he also felt like he didn't really know him. Every time Ozzy came home, he was a different person, sometimes loving and funny, other times broken and lost in the fog of fame. Louis wanted a normal dad, but his father was a rock god fighting his own demons. Despite it all, Louis grew up surrounded by music. He watched his father's concerts, saw the fans screaming, and felt the energy of that world. But deep down, he also felt the distance growing between them. When Ozzy divorced Thelma in 1982 and married Sharon, Louis' life changed forever. His father moved on, started a new family, and became the center of a new kind of fame. Louis was left behind, not forgotten by his father completely, but lost in the background of the Osbourne story. The world soon came to know the new Osbourne family: Sharon, Kelly, Jack, and of course, Ozzy. They became television stars with the Osbournes, one of the most famous reality shows of the 2000s. But there was one face missing: Louis. While millions watched the family's wild life on TV, Ozzy's first son stayed out of the spotlight, quietly living a life far from the madness of fame. For Louis, it was strange. The world adored his father and his half-siblings, but few even remembered he existed. He wasn't angry, but he felt invisible. How do you live when your last name is Osbourne, but no one knows your story? Louis could have easily tried to ride on his father's fame, but he didn't. Instead, he wanted to create his own identity. Music was in his blood, and though his father was a heavy metal legend, Louis was drawn to a different rhythm, the pulse of electronic beats. In his teenage years, he began exploring the underground club scene, fascinated by DJs and the way they could control a crowd with sound. In the late 1990s and early 2000s, Louis Osbourne started building his name as a DJ and producer. He played in clubs across the UK and Europe, mixing house, techno, and electronic beats that had nothing to do with heavy guitars or dark lyrics. He wasn't trying to be Ozzy's son. He was just Louis, a man chasing his own sound. At first, people didn't even realize who he was. He used the name Louis Osbourne, but few connected him to the Prince of Darkness, and he liked it that way. For once, the attention wasn't because of his father, it was because of his music. He released several tracks, collaborated with other DJs, and started his own label called Osbourne Recordings. But even with his growing success in the club world, the weight of his last name followed him everywhere. Interviewers would always ask about Ozzy. What's it like being his son? Do you see him often? Are you close? Louis would smile politely and give short answers, but inside, he knew the truth. His relationship with his father was distant, complicated, and filled with years of silence. Still, Louis kept going. He found freedom in music. Behind the turntables, he wasn't the forgotten son. He was the artist, the creator, the man who made people dance. He didn't scream on stage or bite the head off a bat. He made people lose themselves in rhythm. It was his escape, his therapy, and his statement to the world: I exist. But while he built his career, the gap between him and the Osbourne family continued to grow. The more famous they became on TV, the more he faded from public memory. People thought Ozzy had only two children, Jack and Kelly. Few knew there was a son who shared the same blood but not the same spotlight. Louis never complained publicly. He wasn't bitter. He just lived quietly, doing what he loved. But deep down, He couldn't shake the question. Did my father ever see me the way the world saw him? As the years passed, Louis tried to reconnect with his father. There were moments of warmth, occasional calls, friendly words, but they were rare. Ozzy's life was still consumed by fame, tours, and health struggles. Louis respected his father's journey but also wished for something simpler, a real father-son bond, not just a shared surname. When the Osbournes TV show took over the world in the early 2000s, Louis watched from afar. He saw his half-siblings grow up in the public eye, their fights, laughter, and love broadcast to millions. For Louis, it was like watching a family he used to belong to. But now, only through a screen. He once appeared briefly on a UK TV show with Ozzy and Sharon, and people were surprised. Many didn't even know Ozzy had older children. That small moment reminded everyone that behind the rock star's image was a family divided by fame and time. Louis later spoke in interviews about how fame had affected the Osbournes. He didn't speak with anger, but with honesty. He said that living under Ozzy's shadow wasn't easy. It made it hard to find his own place, but he also made it clear he loved his father, no matter the distance. Ozzy, on his part, has spoken with regret about how his early fame affected his first family. He admitted that his mistakes in those days hurt the people closest to him, but life had already moved on. Louis built his world away from the lights, a world where music and family meant something different. He married, became a father himself, and started to understand what his father might have felt, the pull between dreams and responsibilities. Still, the question remained. Could the bond between father and son ever be truly healed after decades of separation? Louis Osbourne's life looked peaceful on the surface, but deep down, it was filled with battles that few ever saw. Like his father, he faced ups and downs that came with trying to survive in the music world. Being a DJ wasn't always glamorous. There were sleepless nights, unpaid gigs, and endless travel. Sometimes, it felt like he was fighting just to stay relevant. His record label, Osbourne Recordings, showed promise in the early days. Louis worked hard to promote underground artists and make a space for himself in the competitive world of electronic music. But the industry was brutal. Trends changed quickly, and business problems soon hit. His label faced financial struggles and eventually closed down. For Louis, it was another reminder of how fragile dreams could be. But it wasn't just business that hurt him. It was personal too. He was a man carrying a famous name that opened some doors and closed many others. Some people wanted to work with him only because he was Ozzy's son. Others avoided him for the same reason, assuming he was privileged or untouchable. No matter what he did, the shadow of the Prince of Darkness followed him. Louis once joked in an interview, "People expect me to be biting bats too, but I'm more into beats than blood." It showed his humor, but also his quiet pain. He wanted to be seen as himself. There were also whispers that Louis faced legal and financial troubles in later years. Life didn't always treat him kindly, but even during hard times, he didn't seek attention or pity. He stayed away from the tabloid drama that often surrounded his family. Unlike his siblings who lived under cameras for years, Louis chose silence. That silence made people forget him, but it also protected his peace. In those quieter years, Louis reflected deeply on his family and life. He knew fame wasn't everything. He had seen what it could do, how it built legends, but also broke hearts. He wanted to break that cycle. He focused on raising his own family differently, being the kind of father he once wished he had. Still, every now and then people would bring up his father. "What's it like being Ozzy's son?" they'd ask. Louis would smile and say, "It's interesting." But behind that small smile was a lifetime of memories. Some sweet, some painful, and all unforgettable. For Louis, survival meant staying true to himself, even if the world never noticed. By the 2010s, the Osbourne family name was everywhere again. Ozzy and Sharon were still icons. Kelly and Jack were TV personalities. The family that had once seemed broken had become one of pop culture's most famous households. Yet, one name was still missing from that spotlight: Louis. While the others shined on screen, Louis worked quietly behind the scenes. He produced tracks, collaborated with new DJs, and kept performing in clubs. His music might not have topped global charts, but it touched people in its own small, personal way. Fans of house music knew him as a skilled and passionate artist. To them, he wasn't Ozzy's son. He was just Louis, the guy who made them dance till morning. He also began speaking more openly about his journey, not to gain sympathy, but to share wisdom. Louis talked about the pain of being forgotten, the pressure of fame, and the importance of mental health. He didn't blame his father or the world. Instead, he accepted that life had given him a difficult road, but one that made him stronger. He once said in an interview, "Everyone knows my dad as a legend. I know him as a man who made mistakes, who's human, and I love him for that." That statement revealed who Louis truly was: compassionate, grounded, and forgiving. Though he wasn't a global star, he left behind a quiet legacy, a message that fame isn't the same as happiness. Louis showed that you don't need millions of fans to live a meaningful life. You just need peace, purpose, and love. And that's what made his story powerful. He could have turned bitter. He could have attacked his father publicly, or used his last name to climb higher, but he didn't. He chose dignity over drama. In a world obsessed with fame, Louis Osbourne became something rare, an Osbourne who didn't need the spotlight to feel alive. Today, when people talk about Ozzy Osbourne, they remember the madness, the music, and the mayhem. They remember Sharon's strength, Kelly's personality, and Jack's growth. But only true fans remember the first son, the one who walked his own path. Louis Osbourne may never have reached the fame of his father, but he achieved something more personal: peace with himself. His journey wasn't about fame or fortune. It was about finding his identity in a family built on noise and chaos. He lived his life quietly, loved deeply, and never lost his respect for the man who gave him life, even if that man was often absent. Louis once said that he had no anger toward Ozzy, only understanding. After all, life had shown him how difficult it was to balance dreams with family. Today, when fans rediscover his story, they see the human side of the Osbourne legacy. Not just the rock star or the TV family, but the forgotten son who kept the name alive in his own quiet way. Louis Osbourne's story reminds us that not all heroes stand in the light. Some live in the shadows, strong, silent, and resilient. He may be the forgotten son of the Prince of Darkness, but his life is proof that even in the shadow of legends, there's room to shine your own small light. His story isn't about being left behind. It's about standing tall, even when the world forgets your name. And maybe, just maybe, that makes him the most real Osbourne of them all.